Hi everyone, PV here, and today we're going to talk about how I got my face into a Magic the Gathering card. In case you don't know, in Kaldheim, they released a card called Elite Spellbinder, and that card is based on me. So the picture that you see is actually me. It has my name on the flavor text, and that was part of my prize for winning the World Championship in 2020. So I'm going to explain how this process worked exactly and how I came to be Elite Spellbinder and not anything else. When I played the World Championship, I knew that getting my likeness on a card was gonna be part of the prize because they announced that and because Javier Dominguez had done that the year before, right? So Javier won the previous Worlds and he got to make Fervent Champion. Fervent Champion has Javier's face on it, which is, really, really cool. But we didn't really know exactly how that was going to work, and it wasn't something that anyone talked about, right? And because, only one person per year has to really worry about that, so the process isn't public. And, they don't make a big thing out of it like they did before. Because this is not the first time. Javier's card is not the first card that has someone's face on it. It is the first card that a World Champion makes, but it's not the first time that a player has their face on a card. Because we used to have a tournament called the Invitational. The Invitational was a super fun tournament where the winner got to design a card. And some of the cards that you might know are actually invitational cards. For example, Meddling Mage, Dark Confidence, Snapcaster Mage, a Solemn Simulacrum. These are all invitational cards. They all have a player's faces on them. And I only played one invitational tournament. I only played the last one, but it was really one of the most fun tournaments I've ever played. So I hope they bring it back at one point. Before the invitationals, we, the players, actually designed the cards. So when we entered the tournament, we submitted our design, and then if we won, it got made. Or a variation of it got made, right? They balanced it and whatnot. They usually nerfed it because the players tried to make overpowered stuff. But we designed a card that then got put into a set. And I didn't know whether that was going to be the process again or not. We didn't submit anything when we went to play Worlds, right? So I was pretty clueless on how that was going to work. And I didn't worry too much about it because if I won, I would find out. So anyway, I won a tournament. I gave my speech and then I went backstage. And the first person I talked to was my wife, Karina. I was very happy, celebrated, and talked to her. And the second person I talked to was Dave Humphries, who was the lead for Kaldheim. So Kaldheim was the set that was going to come out with my card in it, in theory. So he took me to a room. And he had me sign a bunch of NDAs because he was going to give me information that people were not going to have access to for a couple months at least. So, for example, he told me this new set, Kaldheim set, is a Nordic themed set, right? It's going to have Vikings and stuff. So I knew that before the general public. And he also said that the set was very late in his development process, so we couldn't really change a lot of stuff. But he had a list of cards that I could choose, right? So he was going to give me a list. And he asked if I was comfortable being any of these cards that were already pretty late in their process. So I got to look at the cards and pick one. And it was honestly a bit disappointing because none of the cards was very appealing. Right, the cards he showed me, not every card he showed me ended up being a real card. But for example, Scamfar Avenger was one of my options. Bloodkin Berserker was another one. There's also some Snow Lord. I think it ended up being the Snow King or whatever, the one that comes back to play if you play, if you pay triple snow. Alright, these are all options that I had, but the main problem that I had with these cards was that they were very narrow and specific. Right, so when you have a card with your face on it, you want people to play because you want people to play you, right? And you want to see yourself and you want it to be exciting. So the card doesn't have to be broken, right? It doesn't have to be the best card ever. Wouldn't want it to be banned. But it does have to be, ideally, a card that is widely played. And I think Javier sort of lucked out on that because his card, even though he was a Knights-themed card, ended up seeing play in mono red, no Knights. So it saw plenty of play, but it never saw any play outside of Standard, for example. And I wanted my card to see wide play because not everyone plays Standard. So I was looking for something that could potentially be good in Modern or potentially be good, even in Legacy. That was the dream, right? A card that people wanted to play with in many different style of decks, just because it was a cool card. The more that people play with their card that has your face on it, the better it is, right? And these cards were all very specific, and I wasn't even sure they were going to see play in Standard, let alone in any other format, because they were all themed cards. So Scamfar Avenger is a Berserker-themed card, right? So if Berserkers are good, the card might see play. It's certainly not going to see play in a different format, right? There's no Berserkers deck in Legacy or something yet, maybe. But like it's basically a standard card, and if Berserkers aren't good, it's not going to see play. And the same thing is true for the Snow card, right? If there's a Snow deck, maybe this card sees play, but it's not going to see play anywhere else. And Dragon Cube Berserker is the same. Like, is Bolster even good? Right? I don't know. The playability of this card might depend on Bolster being good. So I didn't really want to give the chance that I would have a card that no one would want to play with. Like, that would be devastating to me. So I wasn't very happy about my choices. And I think he noticed that. And he said, well, if you don't like any of those, what we can do is delay your card for an extra cycle and have it come out in the next set, which I know you will like because it's a School of Magic set. So, I'm pretty outspoken about loving Harry Potter and loving the School of Magic theme in general. So I was immediately very excited about that. And he said, since that is not yet in the final stages of design or development, we can be more flexible, right? We can tweak the cards a little bit and maybe find something that you were happy with. And I was all on board for that, right? For both reasons, because I like the theme a little bit more, or a lot more, right? Vikings are really cool too. Like, I like Nordic mythology a lot, but School of Magic is really just my favorite. So the theme was better for me. And also, I had the chance to customize my card a little bit more, right? I didn't have to choose any of these designs that I didn't particularly like. So it was a no-brainer for me to just wait an extra 3 months and have my card come out in Strixhaven, which it ended up coming out in. And looking back, I'm kind of glad that I did that, because if you look at Kaldheim, he has a lot of good cards, but none of the good cards in Kaldheim could have been me. Right? Because if you look at it, it's like Goldspan Dragon. You're like, I'm not a dragon. It would be cool to have a dragon with my face, but it hasn't happened yet in the invitation. Like Asika's Chariot, maybe there is Apollo in there instead of the cat, but the cat is great. Faceless Haven, Alrund's Epiphany. Like, these are the good cards in Kaldheim, and none of them is a humanoid. So none of them could have been me. So I feel like I dodged a bullet there. Like, there's no humanoid from Kaldhaven that sees any play. So I couldn't have been anyone and achieved in Kaldheim and achieved what I actually wanted to achieve, which was to have my card be widely played. So that basically closed out our conversation at Worlds, because there was no rush anymore, right? They were rushing everything because the set was about to come out, right? But since I was going to delay it for the next 3 months, I could just go back home and figure out once I got there. So once I got back home, I talked to Andrew Brown, who was the lead for Strixhaven, which is the set my card was going to appear in. And then he asked me, so what do you want from your card, right? What characteristics are you looking for? And I explained to him, well, I want a card that is strong enough to see play by itself, right? So it doesn't depend on a theme being good, right? I don't want a card that, if Elves is bad, this card is bad, because then if Elves doesn't see play, the card won't see play. So I want a card that stands alone, that is not part of a theme necessarily. And I want it to be potentially playable in other formats, right? I want it to see as much play as possible. My main priority is that it sees as much play as possible. And he even asked me, like, if you get something similar to what Javier got, would you be happy with that? And I said, that's on the low end of what I'd be happy with, because, it did see play, but only in standard, only in one deck. It didn't see play anywhere else, right? So it wouldn't be devastating if I got that, but I would really be hoping for more. And this, obviously, knowing that, I don't have too much of a say in the matter, but, if you're asking what I want, this is what I want. And he's like, okay, we can work with that, right? And then he showed me a bunch of possible designs that he felt fit my expectations, right? So, for example, one of the cards he showed me was Kalos Blood Mage, which I think is a card that fits sort of what I want, because, again, it's not part of a theme at all, and it's flexible enough that it can see play in a bunch of different spots, right? It ended up not seeing play, but that was one of the options that I had. Another option, what was it called? Let me try to find it. It was a red creature that when you attacked, you discarded a card, and then you could play the top card of your deck. I think it ended up being, let me see, Conspiracy Theorist is what the card is not called. So that was, I could have been Conspiracy Theorist. Right? And one of the cards that he showed me was Elite Spellbinder, which was exactly as it is now, or very close to it. I believe it had some targeting changes from the first version, but it was functionally identical to what it ended up being. And I immediately fell in love with that. because, well, first, it was very similar to my favorite card ever, Vendetta Click, right? So that made it very appealing. And second, it seemed to fit the bill for what I wanted, because it seemed like it was strong enough to see play. It was a very novel effect, right? Like, white doesn't get that. No one got that yet. That effect really didn't exist at that point. But especially in white. So if you want that sort of effect, this is the card you're going to go towards. And it can see play in different decks. It's more of an aggro card, right? So I thought, well, it's going to see play in like mono white aggro and stuff. But I also thought it could see play in mid-range, right? And it does. It does see play in, for example, Band Festival. You know, not the biggest deck, but Winota and stuff like that, right? So it has seen play in other decks. And I thought it could see play in other formats, in older formats. Because, for example, Death in Texas might want an effect like that. I thought Modern Humans might want an effect like that. So, really, the card was everything that I wanted, right? It was a card that was a standalone card, didn't have any, tribal things. They actually told me that the creature type would be relevant down the line, which was cool. I didn't know that. Other than being a human, obviously. But it was a standalone card, right? You could play this card in any style of deck. You could play it in different formats. So I immediately loved that above all the other options he gave me. He also gave me some other options that are not cards yet. Right? I don't know if they'll ever be cards, but this was early in the development process. Then he gave me those options. I chose this card, and he said, okay, we're going to play test with it more, see if it needs to be stronger or weaker, see what we can do about it, and get back to you. And I said, okay, but can we add flash to it? And he said, no. And that was the end of it. So as time passed, Andrew Brown kept messaging me. We talked back and forth, and he would give me updates about how the card was doing. Right? He said, okay, we've been playtesting with this card. We're toying with the idea of adding one toughness to it, or maybe giving it an activated ability, or something else. I'm like, cool. The better you can make it, the better. But can we just give it flash? It's like, no. I'm like, okay, well, we'll table that for later. And he's like, no, we're not going to give it flash. I'm like, later, flash. And that was basically how every one of our conversations went. He would give me an update, I would ask for flash, and he would say no. And then he was like, well, no, but I don't want to give it flash, because the play pattern of, you draw your card, and you play that in a draw step and take away the card that I just drew is miserable. So we don't want that. It's not going to have flash. And I was like, but I don't even want to do that. I promise you, I will only play it at the end of the turn if you give it flash. You can write it down. It can only be played at the end of the turn. It's like, we're not going to give it flash. So that was our biggest point of contention, and I knew he was not going to get flash. But still, I really wanted it to have flash. So I kept asking, and he kept saying no. But other than that, the card didn't change at all. Right? At some point, he came back to me, and he said, actually, we think your card is plenty strong as it is. Right? We don't want to make it better. It's going to see play as it is. Like, it is a strong card. And I believed that, because I liked it originally because I thought it was a strong card. So even though I would want it to be a 3-2, I wanted to have another ability, I didn't really need it to, right? It was going to see plenty of play. After that, sort of simultaneous to this, right? But it came after in the process, was the art, right? And they had an artist that they had commissioned, and they showed me a couple sketches, and I said, okay, I like this one more than this one. But there was one thing that I asked him to change, and that was to make me slightly thinner. Because you see, when I won Worlds, it was the heaviest I've ever been in my life, right? Not kidding. I was way overweight based on my regular weight. The day that I won Worlds, right? That was my peak. After winning Worlds and before talking about the card, I actually lost 30 pounds, right? So I was talking to Andrew Brown about a card, but the last image he had of me pre-pandemic was 30 pounds heavier. And that was reflected in the card. And I didn't like that, because I felt like that was not me. That basically took me in my worst moment and portrayed it. But, it wasn't a lie. That was how I looked like during Worlds, right? So I couldn't really complain about it. But it was, I think, the worst I've ever looked in recent memory. So I would prefer my card wasn't a reminder of that, right? I would prefer if my card looked more what I actually look like. And I'm not going to say I'm a paragon of fitness or anything like that, right? But I'm also not as chubby as I was when I won Worlds. And I'd prefer if the card wasn't like that, because I really do not look like that, right? That was just how I looked in that particular moment for reasons. So I asked him, hey, can you make me a little bit less chubby? And he said, yes, I'll talk to the artist. And he actually did that. So I'm really thankful. And you see Elite Spellbinder, again, not a paragon of fitness or anything, but I actually think it does look like me. Right? Where the other one looked like me when I won Worlds. And I don't think I necessarily look like that. So, anyway, I know a very vain thing to ask for, right? But, I mean, this is going to be my card forever, right? This is immortalizing my face on a card. I want to look good. And not, like, fake good. Like, you don't need to Photoshop me and make me stronger or anything like that. But, I would like to feel happy about how I look in it, if it's possible. He said it was. And I think the artist did a phenomenal job. I think I look exactly like that card. Right, so I saw the art before it went out, and I was super happy with it. Because I had some tokens made of me in the past, and I was like, hey, it's a stretch, but it sort of looks like Paula. And this card, you looked at it, and you could tell it was me. Or at least I looked at it, I could tell it was me. So I think the artist did a really, really good job. I was very happy with the art. Then, after that, came the names. And he gave me a choice of 3 names to choose. And the first one was Elite Tollmage. Then there was Tidecaster, and then Elite Spellbinder. And I felt like Elite Spellbinder was the best. It was the most generic and fit me the most, right? A Tollmage is a bit weird. I felt like someone who was, charging in the toll booth. And Tidecaster felt too much like Tide Taker, and in that vein. So Elite Spellbinder, I felt like, was a unique name that set it apart. So I liked the name the most, and that was the name that I chose, and that was the name that stuck in the end. So that was it. Card text, card art, and card name were ready, and I basically sat on that for a couple months until the card actually got released. And when the card did get released, I mean, I was super happy about the card. Honestly, the card way exceeded my expectations, and it was perfect. It was exactly what I wanted. It looked like exactly what I wanted it to look. It was in the perfect set for me. It was really a confluence of things that made it, I think, the perfect card. I'm really, really happy about my invitational card, my Worlds card, right? Invitational card. But the funny thing was, when the card came out, when it was previewed, people thought it was bad. And I got a lot of comments saying like, oh, I'm sorry, your card's not that good. And, this sucks. And I wish you were a better card, but congratulations and stuff like that. And I just kept thinking to myself, but I think my card is good. These people don't know anything. And not only did I think it was good, but the people that had play tested the card told me, they said, this is good. Right? They were like, we don't want to add more toughness because this card's already good. It will see play. I promise you. I made them promise me that it was going to see play. And they said, yes, it will see play. It is a good card. And I thought it was a good card because that's why I chose it to begin with. And people were like, they didn't think that. And they thought it was not going to see any play. And they were like, yeah, you have maybe the 9th best invitational card or something. And I just kept thinking to myself, I think these people are all wrong. And it turns out that I was right. I think the card is good. It does see play in other formats. It sees plenty of play in Standard. It's seen play in many different iterations of Standards in different decks. So I think the time proved me right, and it proved Andrew Brown right as well, right? When he said the card was good. And me for having chosen it. So I'm honestly so happy that this is the card that I ended up with when all is said and done. And it's still kind of surreal to me that there is a card with my face on it, right? Because everyone gets to play the card and it's me. It's me in there, right? I remember a long time ago, we had these pro player cards that were basically, token cards that talk a little bit about famous players. So that they had, one year they had my card, so it was a picture of me. It said where I was from, how old I was, some of my accomplishments. And this came in boosters or decks and stuff. And I remember playing a pre-release once, and there was this girl sitting next to me, and she opened my card in her pack. And she didn't know who I was, and she just kept looking at her card and looking at me, and looking at her card and looking at me, as if not believing that the person in the card was sitting right next to her. Right? And that was like an incredibly cool moment. And this is going to happen so many more with this card, right? Or the equivalent of that. Because people are going to see this card so much more, and it's me. So it's this really, really exciting thing, and I was super happy with it. After that came the process of maybe buying the original art for Elite Spellbinder, because every Magic card has an original art, right? The card that's originally painted or drawn or whatever, that then becomes the art that is put on every card. And this is owned by the artist, is not owned by WotC, and the artists usually sell these original cards at an auction. Right? And depending on how famous the artist is, how good the card is, how good the art is, they can go for many thousands of dollars. Right? And before my card went into auction, I was contacted by someone related to the artist who said they were willing to sell it to me for a fixed price before it went into auction. So they were giving me the chance to buy them out of it for a set amount, and then if I wanted to do that, the card was mine. It would never go into auction. Or I could just let it go to auction and then bid there if I wanted to. And I thought, well, this is really not the best time for me to be buying art, because, you know, I just bought a house, and at the same time, I effectively got fired, right? We were told our jobs will no longer exist next year. So it's a moment of a lot of expenses and very little financial security. So I'm probably not going to be able to buy it, but let's just see how much they want to sell it for. You know, it is something pretty special. Maybe I can afford it. And he said the price was $20,000. And I said, well, no, thank you. I just unfortunately cannot afford that. So feel free to put it into auction. And they did. And it started at $5,000 and ended up selling for $7,000 in the end, around $7,000. Which is, you know, about a third of what I could have bought it for originally. So I'm glad that I didn't. But I would not have been able to buy it for $7,000 anyway. So it didn't really matter. But yeah, I don't have the original art. But I'm totally okay with that, because I have a gigantic print of the card that I can put on my wall if I want to. And, you know, I have several copies of the card in all the different styles. So I don't feel like I'm really missing out by not having the original art. Obviously, it would have been cool to own it, right? I know that, for example, Picula owns the original art for Meddling Mage and stuff like that. So it would have been pretty cool to have it, but also I don't really feel like I'm missing out on anything, because I do have that gigantic print, and I have all the story of the card behind me. So I think this was a completely fine development for me. And that is the end of the Elite Spellbinder saga. So you got to see how it was designed. I felt like I was included in, you know, every part of the process, even though the card didn't actually change from when Andrew Browse submitted it to me, right? If I did not exist, the card would have been the exact same, just with different art, obviously. But so I didn't change much on it. I felt like I was involved in every step of the process, and they were super nice, right? WotC, I think, went above and beyond to get me what I wanted there. To make me feel comfortable. They were always asking, you know, if I was happy with this, happy with that, what I wanted. Even though I couldn't design the card myself, like past Invitational winners, it very much feels like my card. So, again, I really want to say thank you to the people at WotC that made this possible, because it is a prize like no other, right? It is a very, very unique thing that, you know, to have your face on a Magic card that is actually played, like that, there are not many of those. So this is something that I'm going to take with me forever, and I'm really, really thankful I had the chance to do that. But yeah, that's what I got for today. Hopefully it was interesting to get to hear the story of how a person gets their face on a Magic card. And, you know, Yuda Takahashi, if you're watching this, I hope you have as smooth the process as I did, and I hope you're as happy with your result as I was with mine. But yeah, and special thank you to my biggest supporters, Adam Renzi, Adrian Camilleri, Foxy, Fernando Vizeu, John, Igor Petrov, Jack Hart, Joey, Juan Chow, Calvin Pang, Kathy Massey, Lawson, Mattia Giardini, Nate, Safir Repan, Silvia Leticia, Stu Cameron, Thomas Pokorny, and Dimitri. I really appreciate the support, and I'll see you next video.